All right, future nurses, get ready because today we're diving deep into a topic that's going to be your best friend throughout your nursing career. Protein.
You're going to see just how crucial protein is, not just for building muscles, but for so many bodily functions you'll be dealing with every day.
Fluid balance, pH levels, wound healing. Okay, I'm already hooked. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's start with the basics. What exactly are E proteins and how do they fit into this big picture?
Think of proteins like those amazing structures you see in biology textbooks, all intricate and complex. Well, those structures are built from these tiny building blocks called amino acids.
Ah, amino acids, the good old building blocks.
Yeah.
So how many of these amino acids are there and do they all have the same role?
There are 20 different amino acids, and well, think of them like letters in the alphabet. You need all the letters to form words and sentences, right? Same with amino acids. You need all 20 to build all the different proteins in your body.
Well, I'm following. But I remember hearing something about essential and non-essential amino acids. What's the difference?
So out of those 20, 9 of them are considered essential because our bodies can't make them on their own. We got to get them from our diet. The other 11, well, our bodies are a bit more clever with those. We can synthesize those, so they're called non-essential.
So it's not like those non-essential ones are any less important. It's just that our bodies have got a backup plan for making them.
Exactly. Don't let those names fool you. All 20 are absolutely vital.
Got it. So let's say I eat a big juicy stick packed with protein. What happens next?
Picture that steak as a tightly wound ball of yarn.
Okay, a ball of yarn. I like where this is going.
Now imagine your stomach is like a pair of scissors. When that steak hits your stomach, hydrochloric acid steps in, starts snipping away, unwinding that ball of yarn, making it easier to break down.
Whoa, that's a way more vivid image than what I had in my head. So the stomach is like the pre-processing plant, and then things get serious in the small intestine.
Exactly. In the small intestine, enzymes from the pancreas join the party. They're like those tiny, super sharp scissors that continue breaking down the protein, eventually snipping it into individual amino acids.
So those tiny amino acid pieces, how do they actually get into our bodies?
They're absorbed through the intestinal wall and released into the bloodstream. Think of it like a nutrient highway, transporting those precious amino acids to different parts of the body.
Wow, it's incredible how our bodies break down those complex protein structures into these tiny amino acids and then use them to build all sorts of things. Do they head straight to our muscles?
Not so fast. The liver steps in now. It's like the amino acid distribution center. It decides which amino acids it needs to keep for itself and which ones to send off to other organs and tissues.
So the liver is like the air traffic controller for amino acids. That's so cool. But how do those amino acids actually become part of us? How do they turn into functioning protein?
That, my friend, is the magic of protein synthesis. Our DNA steps in now, acting like a blueprint, guiding the process of assembling those amino acids into specific proteins.
So it's like a constant construction crew inside us, using those amino acids as building blocks to create and repair. But hold on, we're also breaking down proteins all the time, right?
You got it. It's a continuous cycle, breaking down old proteins, building new ones. It's called protein turnover.
Protein turnover. So our bodies are constantly juggling these processes of building and breaking down. Mind-boggling, really.
It is. And this whole protein turnover thing really highlights why getting enough protein from our diet is crucial. Without a steady supply of those amino acids, our bodies wouldn't be able to keep up with all the repair and maintenance, especially when you think about things like growth, recovery from an injury, or even pregnancy.
You mentioned something earlier about protein being involved in fluid balance. Now, this is where things start to get really interesting for nursing students. What is the connection there?
One of protein's lesser-known roles is helping to regulate fluid balance in the body. There are proteins in our blood, like albumin, that help maintain osmotic pressure, which is basically what keeps fluid from leaking out of blood vessels and into tissues.
Hold on. Are you saying that if someone doesn't have enough protein, it could lead to fluid buildup and swelling, like edema? I'm starting to see how this all ties back into nursing care.
Bingo. Edema can be a sign of low protein levels. As a nurse, understanding this connection is a game changer. It helps you assess a patient's nutritional status and identify potential problems before they become major issues.
This is incredible. Protein and fluid balance, who knew? You also mentioned pH regulation earlier. How does protein play a role there?
Just like with fluid balance, proteins are key players in maintaining the acid-base balance, or pH, of our blood. Certain proteins act like buffers, neutralizing any excess acids or bases, keeping the pH in that sweet spot where our cells can function properly.
I never realized protein was so involved in pH balance. But it makes so much sense when you think about conditions like acidosis and alkalosis, which, as you know, are pretty common in healthcare.
Absolutely. A good grasp of protein's role in acid-base balance is going to be a valuable tool throughout your nursing career. You'll be able to connect the dots between a patient's protein status and their overall health.
I'm learning so much. We've gone from amino acids to protein's role in fluid balance and pH. Is there anything else about how our bodies handle protein that nursing students should know?
One more key concept, nitrogen balance. It's basically a measure of whether your body is building up or breaking down more protein. We figure this out by comparing how much nitrogen you take in versus how much you excrete.
So more nitrogen in than out means you're building more protein, right?
Right. That usually happens during periods of growth, pregnancy, or recovery from an injury. It's a positive nitrogen balance. On the flip side, a negative nitrogen balance means you're breaking down more protein than you're building, which can happen during starvation or a serious illness.
There's this case study in the material about a young woman named Mary who got into a bad car accident and was admitted to the hospital.
Oh, right, Mary. Her injuries were so severe that her body went into a super catabolic state, basically breaking down its own tissues for fuel.
Exactly. And because her protein intake was low and she was excreting so much nitrogen, she had a negative nitrogen balance. It's crazy to think about.
Cases like Mary's really highlight how important it is for nurses to understand nitrogen balance. It helps you assess a patient's nutritional status and tailor their care to meet their specific needs.
This has been eye-opening. We've gone from the nitty-gritty of amino acids to the big picture of protein's role in fluid balance and pH, and of course this crucial concept of nitrogen balance.
All right, welcome back to our protein deep dive. In part 1, we got into the nitty-gritty of how our bodies use this essential nutrient. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about something that you, as future nurses, will be dealing with every single day: the protein needs of your patients.
Okay, so we're moving from the microscopic level of amino acids to the real-world scenarios that nurses encounter every day. I like it. And I'm already thinking about all the different patients we'll be caring for: pregnant women, growing kids, older adults. Their protein needs must be all over the place.
You're absolutely right. Their needs are going to vary depending on their age, their health status, and even their lifestyle. Let's start with pregnancy, shall we? It's a time of incredible growth and development, and, well, the mother's body is working overtime to build a new human being, so her protein needs go up.
That makes perfect sense. But how much extra protein are we talking about? Is it a little bump or a major increase?
It's a pretty significant jump, actually. We're talking about an extra 25 grams per day for the average woman, so that brings the total to about 70 grams per day.
Okay, so quality matters just as much as quantity. What are some examples of those nutrient-dense protein sources that are especially good for pregnant women?
Think lean meats, poultry, fish, eggs, dairy products, beans, lentils, nuts, and seeds.
Speaking of fish, I remember learning about how important omega-3 fatty acids are, especially for fetal brain development. Is seafood a must-have for pregnant women?
Absolutely. Omega-3s, especially DHA, are crucial for the baby's brain, nervous system, and vision. The dietary guidelines recommend that pregnant women eat at least 8 ounces of seafood per week. But, and this is a big BUT, it's super important to choose low-mercury options like salmon, sardines, and shrimp.
Oh, that's right. Mercury can be a concern during pregnancy. So a nice salmon salad or some grilled shrimp tacos would be perfect choices.
Yeah.
What about fish that are higher in mercury, like tuna or swordfish? Should those be avoided completely?
It's best to limit high-mercury fish during pregnancy. The FDA has specific guidelines on how much of these fish is safe, so make sure you consult those recommendations and, just as importantly, educate your patients about them as well.
It's easy to forget that as future nurses, it's not just about knowing this stuff ourselves, but being able to explain it clearly to our patients, especially when it comes to something as sensitive as pregnancy. Okay, let's move on to another group that's going through some serious growth: babies and children. I imagine their protein needs are through the roof, right?
You guessed it. They actually have the highest protein needs per kilogram of body weight compared to any other age group. And that makes sense, right? Their bodies are literally building themselves from the ground up.
So much growth happening so quickly, it's no wonder they need so much protein. What are the best sources for babies and toddlers? Is it all about purees and soft foods?
For infants under 6 months, breast milk or formula will provide all the protein they need. But once they start solids, around 6 months, you can gradually introduce protein-rich foods, but, in a baby-friendly way. Think pureed meats, poultry, fish, beans, lentils.
Pureed chicken with sweet potatoes, mashed avocado with scrambled eggs. Those are great ideas. It's amazing how you can sneak in protein even for the pickiest eaters. As they grow older, what are some good protein sources for toddlers and older children?
Once their diet expands a bit, you can start introducing things like eggs, yogurt, cheese, lean meats, poultry, fish, beans, nut butters. The key here is to offer a variety of protein sources, making sure they're getting all those essential amino acids they need for healthy growth and development.
I love that. Variety is key. And I can imagine that making mealtimes fun and engaging can go a long way in encouraging kids to try different protein-rich foods. I'm picturing those colorful plates with animal shapes and funny faces. What about teenagers? They go through another growth spurt, don't they?
You're absolutely right. Adolescence is a period of super rapid growth and development, and protein plays a vital role. Think muscle growth, bone development, hormonal changes. But, and this is a big one, getting teenagers to eat enough protein, well, it can be a real challenge.
I can see that. They're busy, they might not always make the healthiest food choices, and they might even be experimenting with different diets. Any tips on how we can help them make smart protein choices?
Well, for starters, encourage them to have protein-rich snacks throughout the day. Greek yogurt, trail mix, hard-boiled eggs, things like that.
Smart snacks. And I bet involving them in meal planning and preparation can also empower them to make healthier choices.
Exactly. Give them some ownership, and they're much more likely to make good choices. Okay, we've talked about pregnancy, infancy, and childhood. Let's switch gears to older adults. Do their protein needs change as they age?
That's a good question. I imagine as their metabolism slows down, they might need less protein overall, right?
It's a common misconception, but actually their protein needs either stay the same or even go up slightly. Even though their calorie needs might decrease, they still need plenty of protein to maintain their muscle mass and overall health.
Okay, that's interesting. I wouldn't have guessed that their protein needs could actually increase. Why is protein so important for older adults?
As we get older, we naturally start to lose muscle mass, which is called sarcopenia. This loss of muscle can lead to weakness, frailty, and even an increased risk of falls. And that's something we want to avoid at all costs, especially in our older patients. Getting enough protein helps to preserve muscle mass, keeping them strong and independent.
So it's not just about building new muscle, but also about holding on to what you have. Makes sense. But older adults might have different dietary needs and preferences. What are some good protein sources for them?
Easy-to-digest sources are always a good bet. Things like eggs, Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, fish, poultry, beans. And of course, you have to consider things like chewing ability and swallowing difficulties, which can be more common as people age.
Tailoring the recommendations to the individual is so important, especially for older adults. Okay, so we've covered different life stages, but what about people who are recovering from an illness or an injury? I imagine their protein needs would be higher too, right?
Absolutely. When the body is in healing mode, it needs extra protein to repair damaged tissues and regain strength. This is super important for patients who have had surgery, experienced burns, or are recovering from a serious illness.
So how much protein are we talking about here? Is there a general guideline or does it vary?
It really depends on the severity of the illness or injury. A doctor or a registered dietitian can help determine the appropriate amount of protein for each individual based on their needs and their medical condition.
Okay, that makes sense. Individualized care is key. Are there any specific strategies we can use to make sure someone who's recovering gets enough protein? Would protein shakes or supplements be helpful in these cases?
First and foremost, make sure they're having protein-rich foods with every meal and snack. Think about simple things like scrambled eggs with cheese, Greek yogurt with fruit and nuts, maybe a chicken salad sandwich on whole grain bread. If they have a poor appetite or are having trouble eating solid foods, then high-protein smoothies, protein bars, or supplemental protein drinks can be helpful.
Those are great tips. It sounds like finding creative ways to increase protein intake is key to supporting the body's healing process.
Exactly. Now, we've talked about protein needs across the lifespan, from infancy to older adulthood. But before we move on to practical tips for incorporating protein into your own diet and your future patients' diets, there's another important thing we need to address: cultural and economic factors.
That's a great point. We can't just focus on the scientific guidelines and forget about the real-world challenges people face when it comes to accessing healthy food.
Right. Things like Cultural preferences and economic limitations can have a huge impact on someone's ability to get enough protein. For example, some cultures rely heavily on plant-based protein sources, which is great, but others might have limited access to fresh produce or lean meats because of cost or availability.
That makes perfect sense. So it's not just about knowing the RDA for protein, but about understanding each patient's circumstances and finding solutions that are culturally appropriate and economically feasible for them.
Exactly. We need to provide individualized care that takes all these factors into account. We have to be sensitive to these factors and tailor our recommendations accordingly.
This has been an amazing deep dive into the world of protein so far. We've explored protein needs across the lifespan and started to touch upon the importance of cultural and economic considerations. All right, welcome back to our final protein-packed installment. We've covered so much ground already, from the science of protein to the protein needs of different folks throughout life, and those real-world things that can impact protein intake. Now it's time to put all this knowledge to work.
Exactly. We've got the foundation, and now it's all about equipping you with the strategies to, well, first boost your own protein intake and, of course, guide your future patients towards making those healthier choices.
I love it because, to be honest, sometimes I even feel lost in the grocery store. There are just so many choices, and those labels, it can get overwhelming. So where do we even start?
Start by shifting your mindset. It's not just about eating enough protein, it's about eating smart protein. It's not about hitting a certain number, but choosing high-quality sources that are going to give you a whole bunch of nutrients and support your overall health.
Smart protein, I like that.
Hmm.
So for someone on a budget, or let's face it, someone who doesn't have a lot of time to cook, what makes a protein choice smart? I'm thinking about all those busy nursing students out there juggling classes and clinicals.
You're talking nutrient density. You want the most bang for your buck, both nutritionally and financially. Lean protein sources are your best bet. Chicken breasts, fish, beans, lentils, these are all packed with protein, but without a ton of extra fat or calories.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And those options are usually more affordable and, super versatile. You can grill them, bake them, stir fry them. The possibilities are pretty much endless.
Exactly. And for those days when you're really pressed for time, you've got quick and easy options like canned tuna or salmon, eggs, Greek yogurt. You could toss some canned salmon with some whole grain pasta and veggies. Boom, a complete meal in just a few minutes.
Those are lifesavers, especially when you're on the go. I'm definitely adding those to my grocery list. And I bet a lot of those options are shelf-stable too, which is perfect for students who are living in dorms or those tiny apartments.
Another smart protein tip is to think about incorporating protein into every meal and snack. Don't just save it for dinner. Instead of cereal or toast, maybe start your day with some Greek yogurt and berries. And then, for a midday energy boost, swap those chips for a handful of almonds or some string cheese.
Simple swaps that can really make a difference. And bonus, they're portable, perfect for grabbing on the go between classes or, during a hectic shift at the hospital.
Speaking of being on the go, let's talk protein supplements. Protein powders, shakes, they're everywhere these days. Everyone from athletes to, well, busy folks like yourself are using them. But are they really necessary, especially for nursing students?
It's a good question. I've always wondered if protein powder is all hype, or if it's something that I should be incorporating into my diet.
Protein supplements can be helpful for some people for sure, like those recovering from surgery or athletes who are training intensely. But for the average person, they're not absolutely necessary. If you're already getting enough protein from whole foods, you don't really need to add a scoop of powder to your smoothie.
So whole foods first, supplements if needed.
Got it. It sounds like getting back to the basics is really key.
You got it. And remember, protein's only one part of the story. Don't forget about fiber, especially the kind you get from those plant-based protein sources like beans and lentils. Fiber keeps your digestive system running smoothly, and it helps you feel fuller for longer. It's a win-win. You get your protein and all those fiber benefits. Now, we touched on vegetarian and vegan diets a bit earlier, but are there any other dietary patterns that nurses should be aware of when it comes to making protein recommendations?
Yeah, there are a few. One that comes to mind is the ketogenic diet, which is very high in fat, moderate in protein, and super low in carbs. The keto diet can be really effective for some people who want to lose weight or manage certain health conditions. But it's important to work with a healthcare professional to make sure it's safe and the right fit for that person.
So even though the keto diet focuses on fat, protein still has an important role. What about other trendy diets like intermittent fasting? Does protein intake matter when you're restricting that eating window?
With intermittent fasting, it's more about when you eat, not so much about what you eat. But during those eating periods, you still need to focus on those protein-rich foods to make sure your body's getting what it needs.
This is super helpful because, as nurses, we're going to encounter patients who are following all sorts of different diets. Having this knowledge helps us provide the right guidance and support without, being judgmental.
You got it. It's about meeting patients where they are and empowering them to make those healthy choices that fit their individual needs and preferences. Remember, it's not about promoting one specific diet. It's about providing that knowledge and those tools for informed decision-making.
This has been an incredible journey into the world of protein. We've covered everything from the basic science to practical ways to make sure we're getting enough of this essential nutrient and, of course, helping our future patients do the same.
It has been a fascinating deep dive, and I hope our listeners have gained some valuable knowledge and, even more importantly, a new appreciation for just how incredible protein is and the role it plays in our health.
We've busted some myths, we learned about how to choose those nutrient-dense sources, and we really dug deep into the diverse protein needs of different populations. And a key takeaway is that we have to consider those cultural and economic factors when we're making recommendations. Every patient is different, and their care should reflect that.
Absolutely. As you embark on your journey as nurses, you're going to be caring for people from all walks of life, each with their own story and unique set of needs.
The knowledge you've gained about protein is going to be an invaluable tool. Use it wisely, use it with compassion, and always keep learning.
We'll see you on our next deep dive into the world of health and nutrition. Until then, keep those protein levels up and keep that nursing spirit strong.